Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are looking at the Antares class. Now, there are issues with the Antares class, mainly because it has been kind of somewhat shared in different novelizations and everything else. We first get to see it, and it's all kind of written up here at the beginning here on Advanced Starship Design Bureau. It addresses some of the issues here. So we'll just kind of jump into this, and hopefully I can come up with some stats that work for you for an older class ship that would fit in for the original series. So, getting into this, the problem: the name Antares for a starship was first used in the original series episode Charlie X, but the screen evidence was missing until the remastered version of the episode. And the registry remained unknown for the next 25 years. It is possible that the NCC 501 given to the Star Trek Encyclopedia was never supposed to be that of the Antares registry in the old Star original series script, and it was just made up by Okuda. But in the early or entry about the USS Antares in the Star Trek Encyclopedia says that the writer consultant Naren Shankar suggested that the Bajoran cargo vessels in Ensign Row, the next generation, to be designed as Antares class ships. A tip of the hat to the Charlie X. This is merely backstage information and has not been contradicted or and has been contradicted. I'm sorry, in the original series remaster of Charlie X. All right, so I've been kind of going over this for a little while, so I've read through this a couple times, and Jesus, I'm murdering it already. But trying to come up with stats for this for the ship that we see here in the background, and we will get some better views of this before we flip on over to what I've kind of come up with. Now, number two for the problem here, the Antares class ships are frequently used by civilian, old and or human and alien owners since the next generation. There's plenty of screen evidence of these ships. The problem is that they are actually considerably different designs. The only thing that they have in common is that they are usually described as obsolete and don't look like Starship or Starfleet designs at all. Among the ships called Antares class are the Tyrellian ships, uh, Beatrice from the Next Generation, Heart of Glory, a modular cargo carrying vessel. We have the Corvellian freighter from the Face of the Enemy, an equally boxy but different design. We have the Bajoran version, whose warp drive is defunct from Ensign Row, a ship with a triangular basic shape. And then we have Cassidy Yates' ship, Zoza, Way of the Warrior, for the cause, obviously a modification of the Beatrice ship. Now, the entry about the Antares class carrier in the encyclopedia doesn't distinguish between these designs at all and suggests that all the ships should look like the Beatrice. Moreover, the annotations to the entry speculate we further wonder if this might be what the ship of Charlie X from the original series looked like. This is not possible any longer since the remastering of Charlie X. So, number three, Starfleet has an Antares class as of 2368, the USS Hermes, NCC 10376 is the only known ship of this class, and it could not be identified on screen, but it was only listed with its name and registry as participating in the generation of the tachyon grid from the Next Generation Redemption. It is interesting that there is neither a direct reference to USS Antares NCC 501 nor the alien Antares class cargo ships. And last but not least, number four, Chakotay's ship, the Marquis Raider, is also classified as an Antares class in the Jerry Taylor's novel Pathways. This doesn't comply with the above encyclopedia entries at all and hasn't found its way into the encyclopedia or fact files so far. Although Jerry Taylor's books are allegedly conical. One big problem is that Chakotay's Raider doesn't look anything like the original series ship. Actually, with its hundreds of obvious improvised hull extensions, it doesn't look like anything Starfleet whatsoever. So, what would the Antares look like? The Starfleet Antares class, namely the USS Hermes, what would that look like? Is it going to be more like an alien freighter, like an old ship that would be around already from the time of the original series, something like Chakotay's Raider? So people have kind of come together and tried to come up with their own versions of what the Antares looks like. Now, for me, not thinking of the Charlie X, seeing this design, I really kind of like this design. To me, this makes a lot of sense. We have the engines in line with everything else. The secondary hull matches directly onto the primary saucer section, keeps it a nice, sleek, kind of uniform hull altogether. We don't have the neck in there, which, as iconic as it is, and don't get me wrong, I do love how the original, Enterprise looks. But I've always kind of wondered about, and even with the struts for the engines, these are weak points that you could always just try and whittle away with enemy fire and maybe break the ship in half. So, the struts here having to form the warp bubble as well as trying to keep the radiation from the warp engines themselves, or yeah, the warp engines themselves, away from everyone else, especially early on, is more of a concern. Now, when we get into the next generation, and I've just had this comment with my youngest daughter, saying that when we look at the California class, we're walking through the engines to try and get in there and get to our engineering section, which, you know, is great to have something different on screen so you can tell that this is a new ship and everything else. Let me kind of flip back and get us the bottom view for what we have here. Um, the issue I have is we have to walk through the engines to get to the engineering. Uh, I don't really care for that idea. I think if we actually had it a little bit more connected to the ship, I would be happier with that. All this kind of comes back to the Miranda class, where everyone saw that top roll bar with the two extra phaser banks, um, being heavier phaser banks themselves, as well as the torpedo bay up there. Now, uh, once we get that, and then we also get the berth where you're trying to go through that strut to get down there. These are some issues. Now I can always sit here and say you could use a transporter to get there, and then that it would make some sense. I'm not going to bash it that much, but I just don't care for walking through the engines, putting people into possible harm's way. That's my take on it. Now everyone's going to have their own view of it, and that's perfectly fine. So, this is the ship that I'm kind of basing everything off of. Now, this it looks like a more upgraded version, which I did not do a upgraded version of it. But let's go through all their preliminary designs because this is worth noting. People have spent time and effort to try and come up with a ship that looks fitting. So the USS Antares NCC 717, this is kind of the version I was going for here. Not saying that we couldn't have an upgraded version, and I'm treating this as more of a different cargo ship, a cargo kind of escort. Okay, so it's a cargo ship, has a smaller crew. Doesn't it's only got a couple weapons on it, not very many. Now looking at this, it looks like it should have maybe four phaser banks. I've only got one on the front and one on the back. and one torpedo launcher. So not a lot of weaponry here. Okay, just wanting to be honest with how we're doing this. Um, and thanks to all the work that D6 Holocron has done in the past, a big tip of the hat to them, because they actually have, if you go to their website and you click on like the weapons, the warp core or the warp drive and everything else, they have everything to try and help come up with starships on your own. So if there are ships you want to put into your own D6 universe, click on some of these, print them out, and then you can try and come up with making your own ships. That's kind of where I'm going with this. Especially when I'm creating my own, because I mean, hey, they went through the hard work. I just get to capitalize off of their hard work like I would any other Star Wars, Star Trek role playing game, to say how can I come up with my own ship. So here we are. Now they're saying this Antares should be a surveyor class. I'm not saying it couldn't be. Uh, like I said, what I'm doing is more of an escort transport. Okay, as we get through all the different views here, and a nice side view of an upgraded version. Now, this would be something closer to maybe what we would see with uh, the Excelsior being out and about. So, if you have an older ship and you can keep upgrading it and making it work, perfect. We also have an upgrade here in our top hangar. Looks like we could have up to 3 shuttles sitting up here, as well as another 2 or 3 shuttles sitting in the back for our standard landing bay or shuttle bay here. The ones up on top, I'm going to say, are probably for either hauling specialized cargo or something else. So, um, and we have a nice view of what the bridge could possibly look like. With, again, now this is something that we got to see really with the movie version of the Enterprise, where we actually have a shuttle uh, docking bay up on the top. Let's see, a refit LCARs or LCARs here for the Antares. And of course, their class patch. I mean, they have gone all out on this, which is very nice. It really is. Um, Antares lanes shipping. Let's see. And here, so we get to see some different variants of the Antares class, which would be fitting because we do see this quite often with Star Trek, where you look at the Excelsior and then there's the Enterprise variant of the Excelsior, which really kind of comes off to being, they didn't want to really blow up the actual model, so they added some extra features on there so they could destroy that part but leave the actual true model alone, which I can't say I blame them. Let's see. And then we have the upgraded warp nacelles, as well as the our buzzard collectors here in the front. And then saucer proposals. So, they've gone through a lot of different design variations to try and come up with what they've given us. And here's other proposals that were kind of cut down here. So, I kind of like how these are, where it's kind of flattened in the back or kind of cut out versions. Sometimes I think they work out pretty decent, and other times not so well. Um, this is taking a Chakotay Jude version of the Antares. What else do we have for Matt Doc? So taking the standard kind of circular hull, primary hull with a different lower end. Um, and of course, this would be more like the Cassidy Yates version of it, and a more retro look. And someone even did all the extra work on this, trying to make it look a little bit more of what it could have been. Engineering, science, command section, and then really going for a throwback with the old ball for the saucer section, then flattening that out, And last but not least, here, post the original series, uh, kind of a look of what it could have been. So let's see. The concordance design that was refined by Reverend looks very nice and would fit well with the original series era. Lance has conceived an original design which may have existed back in the original series, but would also suit the next generation Hermes. Ryan's first approach to this is to make the Antares class look like a raider. As stated by Jerry Taylor's book, it could have been around for some decades and may have even existed in the original series. The necessary detail changes will show if this works. On the other hand, the Marquis Raider was said to be of the Jude class in the episode Voyager Repression, and a recent article, the Star Trek the magazine, Ryan has also been thinking of Starfleet using the same design as various civilian and aliens. The result is an Antares class freighter which has recently been refined by Maski uh, Tenneco. Finally, there is a somewhat modular design but by Jay, who proposes that the Antares NCC 501 is a very old ship that has been upgraded at least two times, each time changing the overall appearance. We have finally settled on the Concordance Antares, refined and rescaled by Chris. The ship's saucer and nacelles are similar in their appearance with the Constitution class, yet they are not simply scaled down. There are a considerable detail changes. In the light of the remastered version of Charlie X, Reverend has once again revised the same design decisions. The latest Antares keeps the basic look of the ship from the Concordance, yet it is not supposed to be the original series era design any longer. That was later refitted. The new Antares was launched in 2269 as some sort of precursor to the Enterprise refit in 2271. Now, all this is on Advanced Starship Design Bureau, and of course, all the wonderful ships that they have here. And we will kind of go through some of this stuff here because this is where we got our Mediterranean. We're working on the Antares today, and we're just going to have some fun with it. Now, some of the things I do want to note now, they have it listed as a surveyor. I'm looking at this as a light escort slash cargo vessel, very light with weapons. Just keeping that in mind because it has a very small crew. It has a length of 222 meters, a beam of 104 meters, and a height of 33 meters. Mass of 135,400 metric tons. Now, the warp speed I do have knocked down. I have this going slower than what we have here. The crew I kept for a crew of 15 and a crew of 83 passengers, making it a transport ship similar to what I did with the Mediterranean. This would be an older design to work with the Mediterranean, essentially a precursor to the Mediterranean, keeping it as a Starfleet transport vessel as well as a light escort. Okay, something that really gets beefed up when we look at the great. Now my mind wants to have a brain fart here. The Defiant, because the Defiant was originally an escort, really something good for having like trader convoys and everything else. That's typically what I think of when we have escorts, uh, and this being the same thing. You could have maybe two other freighters in line, or maybe a couple more. They could be carrying cargo and extra crew themselves, and when pirates kind of rear their ugly heads, then we have something there to help defend everyone. A very noble idea, and something I think Starfleet would be very poised to try and maintain, try and keeping the safety for everyone. Not trying to say that they're trying to be a big military power. They still want to do a lot of the scientific exploration and all that, but trying to help everyone else is part of what I always view as a Starfleet thing. So, getting on to here, let's get into our D6 stats and see how well I did and whether you agree or disagree. All right, so as you can see, I kept that very old, kind of refreshing look for the original series. Now, the Antares class is a frigate, capital scale, has a length, like I said before, of 222 meters, a beam of 104, and a height of 33 meters. Now, I don't think I changed the mass here, so I guess I kind of flubbed here a little bit as I take a look. 135, 400, because my mind always likes to forget things. 133, 400. All right. So, keeping it roughly at class 5, very similar to that of what we have with our Mediterranean that we had seen last week. Now, autopilot. No, I did not change this from the Mediterranean, and I will apologize for that. Um, but I think the autopilot of 3D plus one should be fairly well fitting. Although I don't remember what we had for the original Constitution class, so that might have to get knocked down a little bit. But I think we can keep it for now. Uh, a crew of 15, so a skeleton crew of 1 should be able to operate this with a plus 10 difficulty. As noted before in the Advanced Design Bureau, passengers being 83. So we can have troops or we can have other people to try and get from point A to point B, kind of shuffle from one assignment to another. We have that available. Now, cargo capacity. This gets a little sticky, and I'm going to explain where I came up with this number. Now, behind me, which you can't see, I have one of the old Decipher books. And for one of the cargo vessel that we got to see in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, that ship is roughly about the same size, has a bigger crew, and a lot more passenger space. It had a crew of like 80 something, passengers of like 300, and had 480 cargo units. And it's only 3 decks tall. So it is a smaller, more compact ship. With that being said, um, I'm I'm trying to remember exactly how many tons a cargo unit can carry. And I wanted to say it was like by 10 or something like that. Well, I just turned it into 48,000 metric tons of cargo space. That's where I'm coming up with this number. Whether you agree or not, I mean, it's up to you. And I've always left this, everything here is if you need to change it, by all means, change it. So that's where I'm coming up with that number. Now, consumables, leaving it as a 3-year consumable, our warp drive. Uh, Same thing with that other ship being a more cargo vessel. And to look at this as being an older ship. Um, I didn't want it to go too fast, as fast as what they had listed, mainly because this isn't going to be a frontline ship that it needs that extra speed. And that's my reasoning behind this. So I do have a Warp 3 for our standard cruise, Warp 4 for our max cruise, and a Warp 6 for 6 hours. Okay. We do have the nav computer. Maneuverability for the time would be a 0D plus 2. Space, uh, I'm figuring is going to be a 5. A slower ship for a slower time. We're not quite there. Now, when we upgrade this, everything can get speeded up. I did not do any of the upgrades, and maybe in the future I'll have the other 2 upgrades so we can do those as an add-on to all this. But just trying to get this out here, trying to get this feeling right. We do have a hull of 2D plus 1 and a shields of 1D. Very fitting for the time. Now, the sensors, I didn't mess with the sensors, so we still have the same sensors as what we've seen before, I believe, from the Mediterranean. So passively, we can scan out to 4 kilometers with a 1D bonus. Actively, we can scan out to 12 kilometers with a 1D plus 2. We can do an active search out to 15 kilometers at a 2D and a focus of 500 meters at a 2D plus 1. They're not the biggest and they're not the best sensors. I think it's okay, but there again, it might be a little overpowered compared to what the Constitution was for that time. So may have to revisit that one again and look at it. I've been kind of going back and forth, trying to get everything right. So where I do mess up, I do apologize. All right, getting into our weapon systems. The Enterprise, when we first start off, has, I believe, a Type 4 phaser bank. I wanted this to have two Type 3 phaser banks. Luckily, D6 Holocron has all the printout and everything. So this is where I'm getting their information for two Type 3 phaser banks. So we're going to have one for a 240-degree forward ventral arc, and the rear one is going to have a 120-degree aft dorsal. Let's see. This is going to make it at Starfighter scale according to their chart, so I'm willing to have that. Rate of fire is going to be 3, and damage is going to be 3D. Now, we do have one Type 1 photon torpedo launcher, which I think I. Oh, okay. I'm trying to see how I messed this up here, and I think I see where I went wrong. Here, how about if I try and fix this a little bit here? This is going to get moved up. Actually, I think I got to do because I kind of messed up here because how everything goes. Let's see. Yes, we're going to do that. All right. Which then means that everything else is going to get moved up, and we'll just kind of do this along the way here, and we'll finish this up here. All right. Again, trying to make sure I'm getting everything, and then sometimes I always miss things, and you guys see it all the time. So, what we're looking at is a Type 1 photon torpedo launcher. Has a fire control of 0D, which is very fitting for the time. There's going to be 40 torpedoes on board. Spread is only going to be 1, and it's going to do 3D damage. Now, the Type 1 photon torpedo is listed in D6 Holocron's kind of work pages and all that, which is where I'm getting kind of the damage from. Puts it into that right frame, so I'm not trying to make it overpowered or anything else, although it is. No, I guess it's on par with everything else. Actually, it is a little bit more powerful because this is all at capital scale, um, which I don't have listed here. In comparison to our Type 2 phaser bank, so I think I goofed something up here. Our Type 2 phaser bank is at Type 3 phaser bank is at Starfighter scale, so it is actually less damage to another capital scale ship. We do have the 2 class Delta tractor beams. Strength is going to be 4D. This might be a little bit overpowered because I did not do anything with the tractor beams. And then we also have the shuttle bay tractor beam, which is at a strength of 3D. Now, crew quarters. We have 91 basic quarters. That keeps everything all in line with everything, and we have 10 expanded. There are no luxury quarters or anything else. I figured that would be something for like the Mediterranean later on. This is going to be a little bit more bare bones and basic, trying to keep things in line with what we would typically see from the original series. And there was one episode where Lieutenant Uhura had actually given up her quarters for an ambassador because they really did not have enough quarters for like diplomats and all that stuff. So and I think the diplomat was still complaining about the quarters. So keeping everything in line with all of that, I didn't want to have luxury quarters and all that stuff listed. All right, we do have 10 decks here. We have 10 escape pods that still hold over from our Mediterranean, and this no longer fits, so I will have to bump this up a little bit, especially if I only have enough escape pods for 40 people, and obviously we have 101, so we're going to need at least Let's see if my little brain can keep things going here. Good 50. That'd be 200. We'll do 30. Oops. Let's see. So that gives us a little extra than what we should have, but also puts them a little bit more here and there. Okay. Now, transporters. We have one 6-person capacity transporter, one emergency transporter for 22 persons, and one cargo transporter for 400 kilograms. Again, I wanted to have this a little bit more basic because the ship is an older ship. Now, once we get upgraded and everything else, and a lot of that technology starts getting to be smaller, um, then maybe we can have 2 transporter bays or whatever. Maybe we even just keep it at the one because it's already has the room set up for the one, and it's just because it's an outdated ship. But that's my design ideas with this. So hopefully you enjoy the look of this ship. Like I said, trying to keep it in line with the original series because this is what it was originally meant to work with. Now, just because we have the an actual Antares that from the remastered version that we would have had from Charlie X doesn't mean that this couldn't be something else. And maybe we should just label it as something else. But because this is what they had worked on, and they put in a lot of hard work, so all the credit goes to Advanced Design Bureau for coming up with the original idea and concept. And I just kind of hammered out a little extra stats for this to make it into a D6 universe ship. Now we will get the actual remastered version of the Antares because I do have that in some of my books and everything else, which we haven't even hit yet. I just figured this is a great website to kind of hit, and they have some interesting designs, most notably this one, which I really do kind of like. So here we are. With that, thank you for visiting. It's always wonderful having you here. Hope you're doing well, and I will see you in the next video.